On a night when snow swallowed the city, hundreds of footsteps rushed past a fragile little girl, shivering on a frozen bench. No one stopped, no one noticed, except for one man. A millionaire CEO, dressed in a tailored coat, made a choice that would change not only her fate, but his own. That single moment of compassion unraveled secrets no one dared to confront and exposed the shadows that had hunted her family. This isn't just a story about survival, it's about redemption, courage, and the unexpected ways love can be found in the coldest places. If your heart believes that kindness still has the power to rewrite destinies, you're in the right place. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe to The Retold Stories, where every tale reminds us that humanity's light shines brightest in the darkest hours. The storm had no mercy that night. Snow tore through the city like shards of broken glass, swallowing the streets, silencing the usual hum of New York. Gavin Whitmore stood at the edge of a grand ballroom, its chandeliers dripping gold light over sequined gowns and polished shoes, and felt none of it mattered. The sound of laughter rang hollow, a cruel echo against the emptiness he had carried inside since his wife's death a decade ago. He muttered an excuse and walked out, leaving behind the velvet warmth and false cheer, stepping into a world that was nothing but white and brutal. His leather shoes sank into drifts with each step, but he welcomed the sting of the cold against his skin. It was honest, unlike the lifeless praise of business partners who toasted him for skyscrapers bearing his name. To everyone else, he was a monument of power. Inside, he was a ruin of silence and guilt. Every snowflake that lashed against his coat seemed to whisper the same truth he had carried for years. Wealth could build towers, but not fill the hollow of a man who had lost the only person who gave meaning to his nights. He wandered into Central Park, where skeletal trees stood like watchmen in the dark. The world outside the gates had already disappeared under a curtain of snow, but he kept moving, not caring where his path led. There was no driver, no entourage, only the storm and his restless footsteps. He thought of the last words he had ever said to his wife, the way regret had stitched itself into his chest like ice that never melted. All this power, and yet he had never felt so powerless. Then, he saw her. At first, she looked like discarded rags piled on a bench, one more forgotten thing in a city that never looked back. But as he drew closer, the shape became undeniable. A child, small and still. Snow had hardened into her hair, frosted her lashes, and frozen her tiny hands into claws of crystal. A pink dress clung to her body, damp and torn, no jacket, no gloves, no shoes. Her lips were cracked, nearly blue. Wrapped tightly in her arms was a battered blue canvas bag, clutched as if it contained her last breath. He knelt, whispering gently. Her eyelids twitched, lashes fluttering like trapped wings. Then came the faintest words, barely carried through the storm. They said it was my fault. The sentence pierced him deeper than any boardroom betrayal, deeper than any courtroom plea he had ever heard. It was the sound of a child carrying a weight no one should carry. In that instant, the storm outside seemed quieter than the storm that rose inside him. He stripped off his coat and wrapped it around her frail frame, lifting her as carefully as if she were spun glass. She weighed almost nothing. The bag remained between them, her frozen fingers gripping it with stubborn strength. He did not try to pry it from her. He simply gathered it into the warmth of the coat with her, as if protecting them both. "Hold on," he muttered under his breath, his voice breaking in ways it had not in years. "You hold on." He ran, his shoes pounding through the snow as the wind roared like a beast, determined to steal her away. By the time his driver spotted him and pulled up, Gavin was gasping, but he did not pause. He slid into the car with the girl pressed tightly to his chest, barking one word, hospital. The ride blurred into a fever dream of streetlights, icy roads, and whispered promises he never imagined himself saying. "You are safe now. Just keep breathing. I will not let you go." He did not know if the words were meant for her or for the wounded man inside himself. Hours later, he sat in the sterile waiting room of the pediatric ICU. His coat lay abandoned on a chair, his shoes soaked through, but the chill that gripped him came not from the air, but from her whispered confession replaying endlessly in his mind. "They said it was my fault." He remembered nights alone in his penthouse, saying the same to himself about his wife's accident. If I had not taken that call, if I had driven instead. The guilt had never left, only buried itself under steel and glass. When the nurse finally approached, clipboard in hand, she asked if he was family. He shook his head, voice rough. I just found her. She nodded, her eyes soft, and reassured him that the girl was stable for now. Frostbite risk was low, but her temperature had been dangerously near the edge. He remained for hours, watching her through the glass, cocooned in blankets, IV lines taped to fragile arms. She never released her grip on the blue bag. When he was allowed to sit by her side, he stayed silent, simply present, until her lashes fluttered and she looked at him. Her voice rasped. You are not mean. He swallowed hard, whispering, No, I am not. She blinked again. Not like the others. Something deep inside him shifted. That a child so young could already measure danger in a person's eyes broke him more than he expected. She reached for her bag, unzipping it with trembling hands. Inside was not treasure, but survival. A battered teddy bear missing an eye, a crumpled notebook, and a folded letter. She placed the paper in her lap without looking at him. Gavin unfolded it carefully. Written in a child's shaky scrawl were words that made his vision blur. Dear lady, if someone finds me, my name is Laya. Please do not blame me. I tried to be good. My mom said, do not trust uniforms. She said run if they come back. Please do not throw my bag away. It has our life in it. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without trembling, but now his hand shook holding that piece of paper. He looked at her, this fragile life wrapped in hospital linens, and whispered, No one is blaming you, not for anything. The snow outside continued to fall, but for Gavin, time had shifted. The hollow man who walked into the park had carried nothing but loss. The man who sat beside this little girl now carried something else, though he could not yet name it. It was heavier than guilt, sharper than grief, but it burned with a strange light, as if compassion itself had found a way to thaw the ice inside him. The days that followed blurred together in a rhythm of sterile hallways, the hum of machines, and the soft whisper of nurses' shoes on tile. Gavin remained at the hospital long after the staff stopped asking why. He watched from behind glass as the little girl fought her way back from the cold, her fingers never letting go of the battered blue bag. It was more than cloth. It was her anchor, her secret fortress. When she opened her eyes, the mistrust inside them was immediate. She did not smile. She did not thank him. Instead, she studied him like someone who had already learned the world's cruelty and was waiting for the mask to drop. When she rasped out the words, "You are not mean," it pierced him deeper than her silence. She had already met too many who were. One evening, after hours of stillness broken only by the faint beeping of monitors, she slowly unzipped the bag. Out came a teddy bear, with one eye missing, then a worn notebook with water-stained pages. Finally, she laid a folded note in her lap. Gavin asked gently if he might see it. She did not answer, only shrugged faintly. He picked it up with care. The message was heartbreaking in its simplicity. A plea from a child named Laya, written as if she had expected to be abandoned. Please do not blame me. Please do not throw my bag away. It has our life in it. Gavin read the words again and again, his hands trembling as if the ink itself carried weight. He looked at her, whispered her name softly, and when she nodded, it felt like a fragile bridge being built across an endless chasm. Claire Monroe, the caseworker, arrived soon after. A woman in her 30s, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She spoke like someone who had seen too much pain to be swayed by surface appearances. She listened as Gavin explained how he had found Laya, how she had clung to her bag and whispered words no child should carry. Claire reminded him that what children like Laya needed was not bursts of sympathy, but permanence, someone who stayed even after the storm had passed. Her warning echoed in him long after she left. Permanence. He thought of the empty spaces in his penthouse, of nights where silence pressed harder than the city's lights. He had been a man who built towers, not roots. Yet here was a child whose survival depended not on his fortune, but on whether he would walk away. A few days later, his private investigator, Frank Mullally, returned with news. They had traced a lead to a rusted van abandoned in an industrial lot. Gavin accompanied him, the bitter wind cutting through his coat as they approached. The van smelled of mildew and old sweat, the interior littered with crushed juice boxes and broken toys. In the corner, tangled in a seatbelt, was a pale blue scarf embroidered at the edges. Gavin recognized it instantly. It belonged to Sarah Quinn, Laya's mother. Alongside the scarf lay scattered papers, including an application for shelter. Sarah had tried to find help, had reached for safety, and yet she had vanished. Gavin folded the flyer with trembling hands and tucked the scarf into his coat, a vow hardening inside him. This was not abandonment. Someone had pushed her into the shadows. Back at the hospital, he placed the scarf gently on Laya's blanket. Her eyes widened, filling with tears as she whispered, "That is Mama's. She wore it when it was cold. Blue was brave." She clutched it to her chest, as if the fabric could summon her mother back. Gavin's throat tightened, his promise to her burning hotter than any corporate oath he had ever made. In hushed conversations with Claire, darker truths emerged. Whispers of a man impersonating child protection agents, preying on vulnerable mothers. His name surfaced. Bradley Hale, once a soldier, later a shadow who slipped between jurisdictions, leaving behind only missing women and children. There were no convictions, no formal charges, just stories of lives uprooted and erased. Gavin listened, rage tightening every muscle. For years he had sat in boardrooms, mastering control over markets and skylines. But this was chaos, born of cruelty, and it struck him with a clarity sharper than any business deal. He vowed he would not stand aside. Laya's trust grew in fragments. She began to speak more, her small voice carrying memories too heavy for her age. She described how her mother had told her to hide if he ever came back. She described the fake badge, the cold smile, the way her mother's voice shook but her hand stayed steady as she locked the car doors. Gavin listened without interrupting, his chest aching, as if every word carved new wounds inside him. Frank's surveillance later confirmed a property upstate, hidden and unregistered. A trailer camouflaged among trees, with movement inside. Children had been seen through drone footage, but their condition was uncertain. Law enforcement prepared warrants, urging Gavin to stay out of it, but he knew he could not. He told himself it was for Laya, for Sarah, for the countless unnamed faces who had vanished. But deep down he knew it was also for himself, a man who had once failed to protect the only person he loved. The night he received confirmation, he sat in the hospital garden, snow drifting lightly over the benches. Claire joined him, warning of the dangers ahead, of the cracks in a system where predators hid too easily. Gavin's reply was steady. That little girl does not care about jurisdiction. She only wants to know the monster will never come back. Claire searched his eyes, and for the first time, seemed to believe him. Back inside, Laya handed him another drawing. Her crayons had sketched a man with stiff blonde hair and a lanyard badge, the figure her small voice named as the one who came for Mama. Gavin's hand shook as he studied it. Not because the drawing was crude, but because it matched the grainy photographs Frank had already placed on his desk. It was him. "You were very brave," Gavin whispered, meeting her eyes. She did not smile, but she did not look away. And for the first time, he felt the hollow inside him begin to shift, replaced with something that demanded not retreat, but resolve. The courthouse in White Plains was not grand. It was all brick and glass, heavy and plain, as if designed to drain hope from anyone who entered. Gavin sat in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, his charcoal suit pressed, but feeling tighter across the shoulders than any boardroom ever had. Beside him sat Claire, calm, on the outside, though her hands adjusted her coat again and again. Between them was Laya, legs swinging from the wooden bench, the blue canvas bag clutched tightly against her chest as if it still carried her entire life. She wore a navy dress, a white cardigan, and her hair had been braided neatly that morning. Someone, likely Claire, had pinned it back with a silver clip so the judge could see her face. Her boots tapped nervously on the floor, the rhythm quickening whenever the courtroom door opened. Gavin leaned closer and asked softly, "Are you scared?" Her eyes stayed forward. "A little." "That is all right," he said. "You do not have to be brave the whole time. You just have to be honest." She finally looked at him then, her gaze steady. "What if they do not believe me?" He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "They will, and if anyone tries to doubt you, I will be right here." When the bailiff called her name, Claire stood, and Laya hesitated, eyes darting back to Gavin, as if seeking silent permission. He knelt until their eyes met, gave her a soft smile, and whispered, "You have got this, kiddo." She nodded once, small but resolute, and followed Claire inside. The room was colder than the hallway. Judge Harlan presided, silver-haired with deep furrows across his brow, a man seasoned by years of cases that had stripped sentiment from his voice. Bradley Hale sat at the defense table, his gray suit neat, his posture disturbingly casual. His eyes scanned lazily across the room until they landed on Laya. For a moment, something flickered, a twitch of a smile, a glint of challenge. Gavin's jaw tightened. The prosecutor requested that Laya be allowed a support guardian during her testimony. Claire nodded toward Gavin. When the judge asked if he was the man who found her, Gavin confirmed, voice steady. Permission was granted. He took a seat beside Laya at the witness stand. The prosecutor began gently, guiding Laya back to the night she had run through the snow. Her voice was small but clear as she said, "Mama told me to run." When asked who her mother was running from, she glanced at Gavin, who gave her a nod. She pointed at the printed photograph placed before her. "That is him." The judge instructed the record to reflect the identification of Bradley Hale. The defense attorney rose, objecting on the grounds of her age, her memory, her supposed unreliability, but the judge waved him down. The questions continued. Laya described the night in the car, how her mother locked the doors, told her to hide, and went outside. She waited a long time, but her mother never came back. Her voice trembled, but the strength in her eyes silenced the courtroom. When the defense attorney pressed her about the badge, she faltered, describing it only as shiny, with words she could not fully remember. He tried to twist her testimony into doubt, but suddenly her voice rose, breaking the hush of the room. No, she did not misunderstand. He was lying. He was not there to help. Even the judge paused, his stern face softening for a brief second. When it was over, the bailiff helped her down. She turned once toward Bradley, her voice steady in a way no one expected from a child so small. "You did not win." Then she walked out, her head high. Gavin remained seated, his chest heavy with something more powerful than rage. It was pride, tempered with sorrow for all she had endured to speak those words. Outside, Claire hugged her tightly, whispering how proud she was. Laya looked up at Gavin and asked, "Is it over now?" He brushed a stray hair from her face, his voice low. "Not yet, but it is close." Later that day, the judge ordered Bradley Hale held without bail. Federal charges were pending, and this time there would be no shadows to slip into, no disguises left to wear. That night, in the quiet of the hospital room, Laya curled up with her lavender notebook pressed against her chest. She looked at Gavin before sleep took her and whispered words that broke him open in a way nothing else had. "If Mama is gone, can I stay with you anyway?" He did not fight the wave of emotion that rose inside. He simply said, "You already do." Weeks passed. Winter gave way to a hesitant spring. At Gavin's estate in Terrytown, the snow melted slowly, revealing grass and birdsong. But inside the stone house, warmth had arrived long before. The great room no longer felt like a monument to wealth. It had softened into something alive. Cushions replaced stiff leather. Children's books lined the shelves. Art supplies filled baskets by the fire. Above the mantel, the blue canvas bag hung inside a wooden frame, preserved not as a burden but as a symbol of survival. Evenings were filled with drawings and laughter, with Laya's mismatched ribbons and Gavin's attempts at reading stories in voices that made her giggle. Claire visited often, no longer just a caseworker but family by presence. The house, once silent, now hummed with life. One night, a knock came at the door. A woman in her 60s stood there, holding an envelope and wearing hope like fragile armor. Her name was June, and she believed she was Laya's grandmother. Inside her envelope were letters, memories, and a fabric star her daughter had sewn as a child. When she knelt before Laya and showed it, the girl's eyes filled with tears. "Mama said blue was brave," she whispered. June's hands trembled. She did. It was not dramatic. It was quiet. But something clicked into place. A tether restored. Later that night, as Gavin tucked Laya into bed, she looked at him with eyes too old for her years and asked softly, "Can I call you Dad now?" His voice cracked, but he nodded. I have been waiting my whole life to hear that. For the first time in years, Gavin no longer measured his worth in skyscrapers or bank accounts. He measured it in the steady breath of a little girl who had found safety, in the laughter that echoed through a home once haunted by silence, and in the knowledge that compassion had rewritten 2 lives. The hollow man who walked into the storm was gone. In his place stood a father, not by blood, but by choice. There are stories that entertain, and then there are stories that leave fingerprints on the heart. This one began in the icy silence of a blizzard, when hundreds of strangers passed a little girl who was shivering, alone, and whispering blame she should never have carried. Out of all those rushing footsteps, one man stopped. A decision that seemed small in the moment turned out to be the spark that lit an entire path of redemption, justice, and unexpected family. Gavin Whitmore had built towers, shaped skylines, and carried the kind of power most people only dream about. Yet none of it filled the hollow inside him. None of it eased the weight of guilt that shadowed every day since the night his wife died. But compassion, the simple act of kneeling beside a freezing child, began to mend something no fortune could touch. That night, he did not rescue a stranger. He rescued himself, too. For Laya, the little girl with frost in her hair and a blue bag clutched to her chest, the journey was even greater. She had learned to fear, to hide, to carry the crushing belief that everything was her fault. She had seen danger wear disguises and cruelty pretend to be care. But in Gavin's persistence, in Claire's steady presence, and in the long fight to bring truth into the light, she discovered something she had not dared to believe in again: safety, trust, and the possibility of family. The courtroom may have delivered justice, and the system may have finally acknowledged what predators had hidden for too long, but the real victory was quieter. It was in the sound of Laya's laughter, echoing in a once empty house. It was in her hand, slipping into Gavin's without hesitation. It was in the night she whispered, "Can I call you Dad now?" And the silence of a broken man finally gave way to belonging. Life does not always hand us moments of clarity in the glow of chandeliers or the applause of crowds. Sometimes it is found in a snowstorm, in the decision to stop when no one else does, in the courage to listen when the world has already turned away. That is where humanity reveals itself in compassion, in constancy, in the choice to stay. If this story touched you, remember that you carry the same power. The power to notice, the power to act, the power to be the reason someone believes they are not alone. And if your heart is moved by tales like these, tales of survival, healing, and the bonds that rise from brokenness, then you belong with us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories and join a community that believes every life, every voice, and every act of kindness matters. Because sometimes the smallest decision can rewrite the largest destiny.